Welcome, everyone, and thanks for attending our June meetup. This is a combined meetup between Civic Tech Calgary and Data for Good. And we're thrilled tonight to have Lee Ackerman with us. Lee is the Director of Digital Strategy at the new SAIT, the Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, the School for Advanced Digital Technology. And Lee will be talking to us about the immense topic of building human and digital futures together. So thanks, Lee, for joining us. I'll kind of let you introduce yourself as you're going through, and yeah, welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm thrilled to be here, and I like your joke. We've picked a small topic for first session together, at least with me presenting, just human digital futures together. Immense topic, and we'll dig into it here in a few minutes. As Jeff was saying, I'm Director of Digital Strategy at a new school at SAIT, School for Advanced Digital Technology. My background before joining SAIT and the new school, 20 plus years in software IT, started off with software design architecture, and that was my calling and first passion, and really looking at not only how to create software, but getting into SaaS offerings, virtualization, and looking at how we help people collaborate and support different ways in which software, as has been quoted since, software is eating the world, how to support that mission. Along the way, developed a passion not just for engineering, but helping other people engineer, create digital solutions, and created curriculums, helped educate lots of corporate training, working in industry, a master's in educational technology along the way. And here with the school, really trying to build this new capability where just recognizing the urgency of building digital capabilities, addressing a digital skills crisis, if you'll permit me that license, and just really excited about how do we help everyone keep up with the accelerating pace. I'll talk about the half-life of skills getting shorter and shorter, and the need to continually learn and to build, and what a challenging landscape. So, very drawn to the challenge of what we're doing, the potential impact for one and all. And, between that and a cup of coffee, I'm pretty bright-eyed and bushy-tailed each day to jump in and solve this problem. So with that, I'll dig into our some slides, some discussion, questions in the chat. Jeff will try and flag some to me as I'm going, and we'll also have some time at the end for Q&A live as well. So a good place to start I'm going to introduce the school before I get too deep into some of the additional digital ideas. The School for Advanced Digital Technology, we're really new. Doors opened last fall with some initial boot camps, some workplace education as well, and we're continuing to add, and there will be a larger curriculum coming yet as well. But as a vision, where we're starting from, where we're orienting, what guides us, we want to bring people together, learners, educators, creators, employers, inventors, learn digital skills, harness a mindset and connections. We want people to participate and lead our digital society. And I'll dig into a few of these things, but hopefully as you see this, you think to yourself, this sounds different for a school. And, part of the reason is this is a big challenge we're trying to solve. And we're not so overconfident or perhaps misguided to think that we can solve this ourselves. It's really going to take all of us. And a thing that we talk about, and you'll probably hear me talk about a few times tonight, is the idea of a digital talent ecosystem. And it really is going to take an ecosystem where we have, whether you want to call it a grand challenge, a wicked problem, a complex problem, there's a role for each of us to play in advancing our digital capabilities. So I hope you'll join me and I'll offer some more details. So when we talk about the school and the story, and we'll come back to storytelling and the language we use and some of the wording that inspires us. And there'll be a couple of words here that I highlight, but the first one is a beacon. And there is some uncertainty. What does the future hold? What is digital going to mean? Its implications? How do we proceed forward? And what do we do with some folks maybe that are a little bit lost at the moment? And so we strive to be a beacon, and we want to attract and spotlight interesting things and be a guide and radiate out great stories and paths and ways for us to get enabled and be digital and succeed. We embrace the idea of being a garage, and right back to Hewlett Packard and Palo Alto, the idea that the innovation happens in a garage and things are tried, there's experimentation, there's some sparks, something might go up in flames, but we'll learn. And there's co-creation that happens, dreams are designed, things are incubated, collisions happen. And this is about empowering and equips and creates and harmonizing. And so it's part of the spirit we want to bring into our space. No, we are not an incubator. We are not an accelerator, but we want to embody that spirit as we learn, and we learn about learning, and we learn how to learn together. We're an urban campus. There's a lot of talk about some of the challenges with what does downtown look like today and tomorrow, coming through various challenges. For those of you familiar with SAIT, we have a campus just outside, our main campus, just outside of downtown Calgary. But we also now, as part of SADT, we have an urban campus. So we're in the Oddfellows building, just on the corner beside Suncor. And we want to be part of the heart of the city. And back to that idea of attracting, getting collisions, and bring together folks, the originals, the creators, the leaders, identify challenges, imagine, and really start to create those sparks again, and hopefully have that reverberate across downtown and hopefully broader, but to really have some vitality downtown and a great space where we can learn, grow, have that garage mentality, and be a beacon. And I know I've shared this joke with Jeff. I also like to highlight, and we have a ballroom. So for events, and whether it's a datathon or other things or meetups, or it's a space where we can convene and talk about how and what digital society is going to mean to us. I talked about the half-life of skills being shorter than ever. And there is a lot of stuff out there, new APIs, new cloud capabilities, new services, new ways to do API, new forms of IoT, AIoT, IIoT, IoT. There's just so many things coming rapidly, so many ways to learn them and engage. And the idea here of a knowledge navigator is what matters, what's important, what is the path, how do we find our way through all of this? Yes, there's going to be change, but what's the right change? And how do we figure that out together? How do we contextualize it into Calgary and Southern Alberta and our strengths and our interests? There's both knowledge and place, and we need to find our way to what the right knowledge is. And the last one, the last noun and set of verbs that we use in our storytelling and that guide us as we're trying to figure out our story, is the idea of a learning catalyst. And you'll see us use the term catalyst a lot in some of our roles, some of our speaking. And it connects really well with the digital talent ecosystem type of thinking. How do we spark change? How do we accelerate change? We don't necessarily have to have all the answers, but together we will, and we'll figure it out. And if somebody has a good answer, how do we amplify that? How do we play that up? And so that curation, ignition, redefinition, reimagining, all come into being a catalyst. And whether it's us connecting with somebody, bringing in a new voice, maybe we'll have an idea as well, but bring that new thinking into Calgary and SAIT, our students, and our partners in the ecosystem. And so as we introduce ourselves, sometimes we start with something a little shorter, a little bit of an elevator pitch, And this idea that we teach and empower people to thrive, create, and lead our digital society has a lot of meaning to us, a lot of meaning for myself, and I hope it will for you. Um, as a school, it would hopefully be obvious that we teach people, but I really like the idea that we empower. Does everybody, and I'll come to deeply into the society part, but across our society, is everybody empowered to participate and feel involved as we learn, as we grow, and try to thrive, create, and lead in whatever digital leads us towards? I'd sure like it to be that way. And it hopefully, I think it maps really nicely to the Data for Good and civic tech, that we want everybody empowered and we want people to thrive where they are able to have a healthy life, a sustainable life, and some enjoyment. And in building a digital society, and I'll dig into that for a moment, we highlight digital society right now, but we think one day we're just going to call it society because everything's going to be digital. And whether it's the chip in our toothbrush, our vacuum cleaner, the many chips in our cars, which are rolling computers, the connections between all these things, it's going to be everywhere, and it's going to have profound implications on what it means to thrive or to create in this space. And so we'll dig a little deeper into the thrive, create, and lead as we go ahead. But I wanted to share that view, and hopefully it draws you in terms of where we're trying to go as a school and how we're looking to play a leadership role in the digital talent ecosystem. And there's room for many leaders in an ecosystem, and we're hoping to be one and have many join us. So I talked about the idea of a digital society, and one day it'll just be society again. But I think it's important in the time where we're at to highlight digital society, and it is different, and there are new things. And we have a little view here where we talk about technology underpins, accelerates, and positively, hopefully positively, amplifies our economy, of course, but how we learn, our health, our passions, how we connect as people, and our growth. And I think a critically important thing here is that it's amplifying the people. And with digital, it starts with people. It doesn't start with the technology. The technology amplifies us, our thinking, our problem solving, our creativity, our imagination, our relationships, how we govern, how we look to build business and economies. But it starts with people. And there'll be a lot of focus as we go through talking about people, digital, and then how the technology further amplifies us. And so it's interesting as I'll connect with various groups, or we'll start to talk about paths forward or the school, and a question will come up. Well, what do you mean by digital? And hopefully the previous comments are sharing about how it starts with people, and it's about a mindset and ways of thinking and how we problem solve, and then amplified by technology. But what goes into this mindset? What are the competencies? What are the literacies that go with? How can we say that we have the readiness and the ability and the skills to be digital and to then thrive and create and lead in the society that is shaped around us? And so in this next section here, and where we'll spend most of our time, is looking at something called digital intelligence, or DQ. And there's a lot to it with some big implications. And I hope this will be a good introduction for you. And there's more information available online, of course. And it's something that I hope you come back and revisit and dig deeper into. And so, building on that idea, we've talked about empowering people, the focus on people. And so digital intelligence, or DQ, it's a framework, a standard from IEEE. It was approved last fall, published in January, so it's relatively new as a standard. In the journey to become a standard, it's about 10 years in the making, and has seen support from various international groups as they went out and analyzed, studied, tested 25 other frameworks in this area. which is surprising that there are 25. And so in some ways that it's only in some cases that it is, oh my goodness, 25. If you're really looking to look this up, you'll notice at the bottom here, IEEE 3527.1 2020 is the standard. So pretty easy to find. And, you know, as I think about getting traction in our society, in our little bit of the world here in Calgary or Southern Alberta, and in our ecosystem, there are a lot of different players, perspectives, organizations. And, you know, you think about our meetup tonight where we at least have 3 organizations with 2 meetup groups and myself as a school and a whole bunch of people. We already have, you know, 20, 30, 40 perspectives, never mind the different companies we work for, the city itself, various startups, accelerators, incubators, other educational institutions, apprenticeship programs. There's a lot of players in this mix, and they all have an impact on how we learn, how we thrive, how we get governed, how we do govern, how we get our health care. How do we find our way in that world? How do we, if we're looking for employment, for instance, figure out what job's right for us? How do we figure out what education to get? What skills do we need? And what is the friction if we all go back to that first question when we look at a posting or we're about to post for a job, if nobody agrees on what it means to be digital? And that's a lot of friction. And it ends up being a lot of wasted time, uncertainty, and a lack of clarity on where and how we move forward. And so what we're hoping is that we can gain agreement and momentum across Calgary to say, you know what, let's leverage a global standard. And it, by the way, it's the world's first and only global standard around what it means to be digital. And as we think about this, there's 3 maturity levels in the framework. And so it's nice to be able to assess ourselves and say, you know, at what level do we operate? What level do we all need to be at? And I would venture that at a minimum, wouldn't it be outstanding if everybody here in Calgary was a digital citizen and they can use digital technology and media in safe, responsible, and ethical ways? What a great place it would be to live, where we can all do that well. And then as we take a step above that, the idea of being a digital creator and be a part of the digital ecosystem where we create new things, new knowledge, new technologies, new content, and ideas become real. And you think about probably a lot of people on this call, in this meeting, in this session, this meetup, we're digital creators or trying to be, or maybe more. And if we're more, maybe we're digital competitors. And here we're solving big problems, wicked problems, global challenges. We're innovating, creating new opportunities, new ways of doing things, having social impact. And whether it's in a community, an enterprise, or across borders, having positive impact in driving growth and making things better for people. And so these 3 maturity levels are a start. And what they do is they interact with a number of different engagement areas. And they're popping up here, and I'll dig into them more in a moment. But what ends up happening is we start to see that, well, it's not just about using digital where you say, well, I have a device or I have a service. Maybe there's some more fine-grained aspects to being digital. Maybe there's more about identity or communication or literacy, for instance, and I'll dig into them in a second. But it's the connection of the two that become really interesting and start to guide us and give us depth in terms of defining our digital maturity, our competencies, and help us find that path, identify gaps. Where do we need to learn? Where can we help others? How can we help people come join the party and succeed and be part of the digital society? It built too fast. So we'll look at the first 4 engagement areas. And one of the things that I like that are highlighted when we talk about digital intelligence and DQ is there's been a very strong infusion of thoughtfulness around well-being and ethics and sustainability. And you'll see influence from the UN Sustainable Development Goals, OECD's well-being indicators, and hopefully it pops here on the slide with some of the yellow text, even just the simplicity of saying, you know what, when we think about our digital identity and having a competency here, do we have respect for ourselves? Do we have a positive online and offline identity? Are we the same person here now online as if we bumped into each other on a corner downtown? If Jeff and I saw each other in real life, which we haven't yet, it's all been virtual, would he recognize me in the way I carried on? And would I recognize him? I sure hope so. I think how we see him here is how he really is, but that might not always be the case with other folks. Digital use, do we have respect for time and the environment? Do we use technology in a balanced, healthy, and civic way? Again, sort of that positive orientation. Digital safety, respect for life. There are cyber risks in terms of how we use the safety and ethical side of technology. And then from a security side, a respect for property. And, things are not disposable. And, whether it's a device, a network, or a system, do we respect those things? The second grouping here, the final four to make up to 8 engagement areas. First one, digital emotional intelligence. So really bringing forward, not just EQ in the case where it would be face-to-face, but does that EQ or emotional intelligence, how does it transition to online? And how you express your emotions as we engage like we are at the moment. Are you able to pick up on what emotions someone is bringing into a meetup, an online meeting, a text? How do you carry yourself? And do you have that respect there? Digital communications, respect for reputation and relationships. Boy, has this year been a test of that. and how we use these tools and how we engage. A digital literacy and a respect for knowledge. So, finding, reading, evaluating, not just information, but media and technology itself. Are we able to master technology, or is technology our master? Do we actually understand how to use it, how to shape it, and how to thrive with it? And then last but not least, digital rights. And I know a little redundant, respect for rights, but whether it's human rights, legal rights, things that have been built in copyrights, is there respect there for the things, the ideals, and one another? And so at the intersection of the maturity levels, the citizenship, creativity, competitiveness, and each of those engagement areas are a set of competencies. And when I use the word competency, I'm trying to be true to the spec and standard. I should be even true there and accurate to the standard. It's not just a spec, but a standard. That a competency is defined as a grouping of knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. And I think it's important to keep all three of those in mind. It's not just about knowing something. It's not just about having skills to do something, but there's also attitudes and values that go along with it. What is your mindset as you try to be a digital citizen and have that identity? What is your mindset and your values as you use technology? That influences how you apply the skills or how you reference the knowledge or share the knowledge. That frame or that taxonomy, again, I'll try and be precise here, that taxonomy of defining a competency, again, it comes from an international body. The OECD has a learning framework oriented towards 2030, so forward-looking, where they define that taxonomy. And so as we look at the list of competencies here with citizen, I'll just remind you that the idea here is that there is a healthy, ethical use of digital across these different dimensions. And hopefully you see that reflected here in those competency names. And as we go to the next level here and start to look at creativity, we're creating things now across these dimensions. And so whether it's now not just being balanced in our use of technology, but getting healthy. If we look at EQ, it's not just being empathetic, but some more self-awareness and management as we engage. As we look at things like literacy, it's just not media and information literacy, but also content creation and computational literacy. We're pretty comfortable rolling up our sleeves, getting to the keyboard, for instance, writing code, configuring, deploying, creating an VR immersive experience, maybe soldering and connecting sensors and reading from those sensors. As we get into competitiveness and the competitor layer, we're solving big problems. And you see that reflected here in the names of the competencies. The idea of being a digital change maker and that being your identity. That excites me. I'd love to be a digital change maker and be out there having an impact. Hopefully I'm having a little impact today. The idea of a civic use of technology, right? That we're having that bigger impact, that positive impact. When you look at communication, it's not just one-to-one. We have comfort and we're out there on a very public and mass communication. We're on a big stage and able to be very comfortable in terms of how we communicate and how we carry ourselves. As we get into literacy, we're seeing some really cool stuff around data and AI literacy. There are some amazing things that can be done, not only with AI, but data is more important now than ever. And every time I talk to Jeff, I bring up, I really love that meetup a month or two ago where we talked about OCAP and how important that is and the thoughtfulness around who owns data and having rights and being respectful. And that maps into here so nicely where, it's not just a technology thing when we talk literacy, but also the thoughtfulness of its impact on people and the role people are going to play. And if we're going to be a competitor and solve big problems, those ideals and ideas need to guide us and shape us. And so when we look at our school, the things we're trying to do and how we engage with other folks, DQ and digital intelligence is at the core of what we do. It plays a big role. It's part of why I'm here today, sharing the message and also inviting feedback and testing ideas, back to the idea of the garage where you learn through experiments and testing things and getting them out there into the real world. And so, I encourage you, whether today or beyond, to be thinking about DQ, the maturity levels, the areas, and how they apply and how they extend outwards. And so for us, again, this is our center, but it's amplified and extended out with a set of mindsets and perspectives. And if we start at the bottom left, there's the SAIT logo. And not that the mindset and perspective is SAIT oriented, but SAIT brings a perspective in of applied learning and applying things and testing things and making them real. And oftentimes digital can be pretty abstract. And so I love the idea of bringing that perspective from SAIT into the discussions. How do we make digital real? How do we test things? How do we get from theory to practical and to learn the real lessons? Because reality can give some very real lessons. Moving up to the next circle, DTPR, that acronym expands out to digital transparency in the public realm. And again, in this case, it is a specification. It's not a standard. It's an open spec. And what's interesting here is not so much that we're saying you have to adhere to the spec, but what the spec brings forward from a thoughtful point of view and a mindset and a perspective. And as a bit of history that leads up to the spec, you may have seen in the news probably about a year ago, and it was in the news for a couple of years before that, the idea of Toronto becoming a smart city and being some more supported by Alphabet, Google's parent company, to bring a lot of digital into the city and to essentially make it part of the fabric of the city, or at least a portion thereof. And it was very opaque in terms of what the implications were for citizens, except for the fact that, hey, you're digital and everything digital is good, which is not enough. That's a lot of trust to say, hey, trust us, we'll do digital. We'll treat all of your data that we capture, everything from, your private conversations to how you walk, to when you walk, to where you go and what you buy. And I might be exaggerating. I don't know all that can be measured, but it caught people where they needed more than just insights that trust us, this is good. It's technology. Technology is always good. There needs to be more. And so many activists rose up and the initiative died. And some folks that were part of that have learned some lessons. And now they're no longer with Alphabet, or other companies that were part of it, but they took some really good lessons out of it and brought forward the idea that people need agency. They need to know when they've crossed the boundary between the physical world and digital. There should be a cue, there should be a sign. And they took it very literally. They came up with a set of iconography, graphics, whatever you want to call them, where you can put that sticker, a sign, somewhere in the physical world to say there is a boundary here between the digital and the physical. And this is what's happening here. And whether it's closed circuit TV, a sensor, or something else, note that this is happening. And beside that icon is a QR code, which you can scan with your phone to get details on what's being captured, who's capturing it, and how it's being used, to give people agency and to let them know what's happening. And so we're inspired by that and love the idea that as digital is going to be everywhere, you should know where it is, especially when you can't see it. It needs to become visible and you need agency. And so that mindset and perspective further aligns with the idea of empowering people. Agency, empowerment, knowledge, transparency, that has to amplify what we talk about with DQ. I talked earlier about the UN Sustainable Development Goals infusing and inspiring many of the competencies of DQ. Well, there's more than what can fit into DQ. And when we start talking about sustainability and diversity and access to learning, I cannot imagine a future moving forward where we're not giving more access to learning and making it easier and more inclusive for people to participate in a digital society. So we take inspiration from that and leverage that mindset and perspectives. We further look at ethics, and whether it's tech ethics in general, looking at things like AI and algorithms, and you'll see a lot of discussion about, well, what if there's some hidden bias in there where a decision is being made that impacts our life? These ideas need to be thought about. Similarly, as we come to data, so things like OCAP and other ideas, what data should be captured, who owns it, what rights do you have to use it, what decisions can be made? Those things need to be considered. And then last but not least, we further amplify DQ and all these other dimensions by ideas like having an agile mindset, being willing to run experiments, to fail forward. And when I think about my students and future students, they might be going into an organization, whether social enterprise, private enterprise, or an enterprise they're starting. Well, let's focus a little more on the first two, maybe the existing ones, where they're the first to have these ideals and to have this background, and they are the change agent. And as part of their mindset, they need to recognize maybe they need to be patient. Maybe they need to help people understand how things fit together. Maybe they need to show rather than tell. And that needs to be part of the mindset here too. We want to bring people along, and being a change agent brings, there's some responsibility that goes with it. Our next layer out here in our thinking is the technologies themselves. And if you see me deliver this before, every time I deliver this, I highlight we're on the third layer and we're just talking technologies. And it just further reinforces, I hope, that being digital and thinking about learning to be digital, it starts with people, and the technology amplifies. So we went from DQ to the mindsets and perspectives to now the third out, technologies. And we have a sampling of technologies here that interests us. And I know there are more technologies out there, but areas we're digging into and are interested in: XR, extended reality, AI, cloud, analytics, automation. And I know I've got a robot here and you might think just robots, but that robot could be software, it could be RPA. It could be forms of hyper automation like low code, no code. It could be using things like robotics themselves, the physical kind, and even getting into some of the sensors and IoT, IIoT or AIoT. And then last but not least is 3D printing and additive manufacturing, and really starting to look at our physical constraints are perhaps impacted now by what we can model digitally and then produce as needed. And I think it's going to be just so exciting to be thinking about how that intersects with our software-infused digital society. Having that mindset, the perspectives, the technologies, they don't stand alone. We're learning that for purpose and to have an impact somewhere. And so areas and domains that we are intrigued by and we think are important for Calgary: finance or fintech, healthcare, smart cities or our city, energy, manufacturing, hospitality and tourism, education, and agriculture. We might have a lovely debate on what the right priority is across these items. But, you know, if I were to be downtown and stood on a tall building and kind of pondered about, well, what is a key driver? I could look at a building and say, oh, well, of course, energy. That one's easy. And I'd look around and, you know, see the city abuzz and go, well, of course, the city makes sense. And I know we all need healthcare. We all do banking and use finance. There's amazing manufacturing going on in the city that's continuing to grow. People fly from all over to come to Banff and to visit Calgary and the Stampede. Hospitality tourism is big. Education, well, I hope it's big. That's my career at the moment. And agriculture, right? We don't have to look far to see the fields outside the city and the food created and the ranching. These are big parts of our story. And so when we look at our curriculum and where we look to have an impact, we've done some prioritization and we keep testing this. We're still figuring out and building out our curriculum. But where we're looking to place our bets, fintech, energy, and agriculture, and really seeing those as great places, not only to tie together the digital, the mindset, the technologies, but also some of the various schools at SAIT and various members of our ecosystem, where in a digital world, and we think about our mindset, there's a lot of value that comes from breaking down silos, of co-creating and bringing together different components. And I'll joke that that's where the magic happens, is by bringing together, in the case of fintech, for instance, something like a school for advanced digital technology, programming skills from something like a computer science degree or something from SAIT's ICT school, the School of Business coming in there, and bringing those different perspectives, skills, and expertise, things get really interesting. I've got one more layer here that we build out, and it's recognition of achievement. And whether that's credit or non-credit, so we had mentioned datathons, or Jeff did, hackathons, datathons can lead to trophies and prizes, and a great way to recognize achievement. But so can a micro-credential. And as we look over on the left-hand side for credit, again, we're still working towards this, and love your feedback today or beyond, where we're looking at what is the right digital degree or diploma. And an idea that's really intrigued us and we're investigating and experimenting with is the idea of a post-diploma or post-degree certificate, where the idea is to be a finishing school and to attract folks that have already said, you know what, I know how to program, or I know how to do accounting, or I know how to do finance, but how do I bring the two together and bring together this full stack as part of that, where we have DQ, we have the mindset, we've tied to finance, and we're bringing together these different backgrounds. And we think that's really exciting and be a value add to our community, is to help people bring together and connect the dots and to be a little bit different. I talked about our digital talent ecosystem. I've talked about change, a digital skills crisis, and our path forward, or what we think is a good path forward and how we look to engage. We think co-creation plays a big role. Working together, building together, hosting solutions together, trying to find ways to spark collaboration. I think there's amazing things that will happen, for instance, as SADT works with Data for Good. I think we can do something magical there to curate and bring ideas into the community and to help cut down on some of the noise, especially as we try to localize it and to make it meaningful to Calgary. Energizing. So it talked about the urban campus, and we're all itching to get into our building, which has been rather empty over the last year. And, you know, thinking about, you know, not only having people and energy, but some technologies and some play spaces. whether it's for full grown people or some that are not quite full grown. We have a DX youth program where it's about digital transformation for young people. And to have them come in and have play spaces, I'll say, for me, it's play, but with different technology and to be hands-on and to have them wowed, not only by the space, but the experience, and to be excited about digital and technology and creativity and the intersection with art and the ability to change the world. That's exciting. The idea of incubating, again, not to be a venture incubator, but to incubate ideas and passions and new ways of learning. And to connect to an incubator is great as part of the connections, but to really surface learning and to what it means to be digital. And last but not least here, the idea of bridging. People shouldn't be left behind. There should be a path from where we are today to where we're trying to go, and to provide some clarity for folks for how you get from one to the next. And ideally, things like DQ and digital intelligence help with that, where people can say, you know what, my first goal from where I am today is I want to be a digital citizen. I know I need to do a better job of managing my screen time, of being able to step away from work. I don't have to answer that text message immediately. I can get to it tomorrow. I don't have to post everything. I don't have to respond to everything. And, making digital work for me. And gosh darn it, if we were all digital citizens, as I said, that'd be a great step forward. So I'll make those build really quick. And some questions for you guys as you think tonight and the days ahead. Where would you see yourselves? And I know we went over at DQ at a high level, but where would you place yourself? Are you a citizen today? Are you a creator? Are you a competitor? Maybe somewhere mixed. I think for myself, I'm probably somewhere mixed. Somewhere I might be a citizen, somewhere a creator, somewhere a competitor. I don't think it's going to be as simple as just saying, hey, you've checked all the boxes, but I challenge you, reflect on it. Where do you see yourself? And what about the people you care about? And whether it's family, friends, or colleagues, where are they? And what challenges or benefits does that provide? And again, with your organization and your business partners, where are they right now? And if perhaps from an organizational point of view, you're not quite at the DQ level you would imagine is needed, what do you think the implications are? And what do you think the impact would be if you raised your DQ? And all of a sudden, everybody was a digital creator. And what would it mean for your business and your impact? Or if you're a social enterprise, what would it mean for the community you served? And so as you're pondering that, I'll highlight here before we get into some Q&A is as a school and our part in the digital talent ecosystem. We make some commitments and things we're trying to do. And the first one here you see is with the DQ framework. We're trying to talk to a lot of people and introduce things and various events where we think, and there's the famous quote from years past that a rising tide lifts all boats. We think DQ is part of that rising tide. And if we can reduce friction about what does it mean to be digital, what skills do you have, what competencies, what are the areas that it impacts? If we can get to a baseline and agree to those things, it accelerates us and we can start solving bigger problems, more interesting problems. So a passion and a campaign for us is to drive adoption. And rather than suffer from, a not invented here, we could come up with, the CDQ, the Calgary Digital Intelligence Framework. And at the end of the day, it probably wouldn't be much different. And we'll have spent a lot of time not solving real problems. So we're big fans of DQ in general, and even more so that it lets us get to the bigger problems. We commit to be a convener. We want to bring people together. And as a matter of fact, we'll go to where people come together, like tonight, being able to join you all and to talk about these things and to share and to learn together. And then last but not least, to co-create. I'd like to think we're pretty humble and we know we don't have all the answers. And as a matter of fact, I don't know that anybody does. This idea of being a digital society, of us all being digital, building skills, what's the best way to be a continuous learner on a lifelong learning 6-year curriculum? Nobody's figured that out yet. And I think the way we do is we do it together and we create that model together. And how do we learn? How do we share? And, you know, the way we solve, I think, is going to be so amazingly different than what we think of as education from the past. And we'll see more coaching, and we'll see more mentoring, and we'll see more engagement with workplaces and different types of learning, and cases where we have an example right now. We have a couple boot camps running where we have a product management boot camp and a VR immersion experience boot camp. They start at the same day separately, but they converge in the middle and they meet up. And the product manager works with some of the developers, and they have a client. It's some of the other SAIT schools that need some VR stuff, but it's a start where you've got this triangle now with some tension: a client, a product manager, and developers. And I'm going to guarantee you that there's different views on what they're going to build and what they need. And that's a powerful part of learning, and an important part. If you're going to succeed as a product manager, you better know how to work with developers and a client. And if you're a developer, you know, the client, well, not that the client's always right, but the client's always right. And that needs to be learned. And how do you transition, and how do you ask better questions? That's important. And so I think that's, you know, a reflection. We took some inspiration from some of the dojo models, and we're going to keep experimenting, but there's going to be different and better ways to learn, and a lot more applied learning, and a lot more focus on culture and how to map into cultures and organizations. And we're going to do that together. And so, Jeff, that is my last slide here. And if there are questions or comments, I'd be thrilled to discuss further.
Yeah, this has been great, Lee. Thanks so much. It's amazingly, you know, comprehensive framework, the DQ framework, and it's just great to see how it kind of all ties together, right? And there's so many pieces, and as you drill down to deeper levels, it becomes very rich, and the things you need to think about and talk about and act upon. You know, it's kind of cool for us, you know, from both from a civic tech and from a data for good point of view, to see how our groups, you know, map in there, right? And there's many kind of touch points there that we see, and you know, and maybe just a comment from you on sort of you know, engaging with the community, right? And how do you see that rolling out? And are there specific things that you're doing to try to encourage that engagement with community groups as well as with kind of citizens themselves?
So the short answer and is yes. Again, it's early days, and we're working towards things. So an example that I'll offer is we're in short order publishing a digital talent ecosystem playbook, and that'll be out and available here towards the end of the month. And what we're looking to do is to set the stage of further setting examples, and we've got some good stuff coming along with it about solving digital skills crisis together and collaborating. And so there's a couple plays within the playbook as a starting point to highlight the idea of, well, what is a play? You know, as a nice tactic that we can try to solve some problems, but also looking at the life cycle for a playbook, how we collaborate. The plays themselves are going to be hosted on GitHub as Creative Commons. We have a handful of additional plays and topics that will seed the repository. Where did the plays and topics come from? Well, we've been doing some homework and meeting with companies and interviews and workshops as a way to bring that into the environment and into our community to start a discussion and to say, hey, let's try these and let's run experiments and let's learn together. And so it's really meant to ignite. And so that's coming out soon. There'll be some announcements and all that. I'm super excited about that. Mm-hmm. We're meeting with groups like we are here today, lots of them. You'll see myself, Jim Gibson, Jasmine Pilardi, and others sharing, getting feedback. We're working with industry groups. We're meeting with social enterprises, met with some other ones yet today earlier, and trying to bring people in, trying to radiate out, And I guess the last thing I'll add before I go on too long is just the idea of trying to be a catalyst.
Yeah.
So how do we put enough out to help everybody else succeed on their own and move faster, right? It's not SADT story about being digital, it's everybody's. So what do we do to help everybody along? And so that mindset and perspective is pervasive on our team. And we hope it's the right one. We think it is, we hope it is, and many experiments to come.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and as the kind of the tech ecosystem kind of grows, right, there's that role is so important to be that connector and convener. So going back to some of the earlier discussion in your deck around, you know, digital society, there's a comment about you know, being impoverished, you know, means not being able to participate fully in the digital aspects of our society. I think it's a good point, right? We talk about empowerment, but the flip side of that is being impoverished, or you know, technology poverty, as it sometimes can be called as well, right? So I guess the follow-on question is, you know, how do we engage with the somewhat, you know, unrepresented or unlikely portions of society, right? That may not even, you know, have access to a computer or the internet, or, you know, not be in a position, maybe with through language or whatever, to engage in this. How do we kind of work that part of society as well?
That is a great question, and I'm gonna highlight. I've said multiple times, I don't have all the answers. I don't know, but together, I think we'll figure out ways. And part of it is that should be a goal for us, right? If we're not doing that, are we really successful? If all we end up doing is building a digital enclave with a wall or a moat, is that really success? And I don't think so. So, you know, things to do, things we are trying to do. You know, when you look at the youth program, where we're bringing a lot of kids in, and there is no cost to schools. We have the equipment. We're providing that spark and exposure and the ability to engage. And I know it's not enough, but it's a start, and it's part of the story. The other thing that I'll highlight here that I think is interesting is part of our mandate is also to impact the rest of SAIT. And if you say, you know what, maybe a traditional career path for somebody is not necessarily the IT developing type of thing, but maybe they're going to go into construction. And it's like, well, we're going to have an impact there too, where that's going to be infused with digital. As a matter of fact, our School of Construction is already doing that. And I think it's really redefining what some careers are. And the ability to bring in AR or 3D printing and see that as part of what was perhaps a different type of trade or a different type of skill or career, and say, you know what, this is really exciting and interesting and just as valuable as some other career, also plays a part at chipping away and giving access. So I think there's going to be a lot of stories and a lot of different approaches that are going to be needed. And we're going to play a role, but it's just a role. And I'm going to look to Jeff to solve 80% of the problem.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So there's a question, where does digital sovereignty fit into this picture? But I will kind of extend that a little bit, right, into the whole sort of ethics and aspect of this, right? So there's, you know, data ethics, AI ethics, and digital sovereignty is kind of part of that, right? But, you know, there seems to be a number of different rules based on who you are, right? So if you're a Google or a Facebook or whatever, you essentially do whatever you want, and nobody can really touch you because you have the power. But, you know, it's our data in a lot of cases, right? So
well, and eagerly shared in a lot of cases.
yeah, that's true. There's something we get from that. You know, you can question whether the consent we are, you know, a 20-page online consent form really is telling us what we need to know. But yeah, no, it's part of it, right? So, but how do you approach those fuzzy questions and black, gray areas, right? When you're trying to teach or learn about ethics or about data sovereignty or about these sort of things.
That is a great question, and I have two answers, and I think there are a lot of answers, but I have two. So one is we're actually running a series of ethics workshops here towards the end of the month, and we're piloting them. And so we've invited folks in from our ecosystem to test them out. And so the three workshops, one is tech ethics, one is AI and algorithms, and the other one is privacy and democracy, which is covering a lot of landscape. And depending on feedback, depending on how it goes, we'll run them again. Maybe we'll run something else. But these are topics that need to be explored. And we need to ask exactly these questions. And to have that debate, that testing has to happen. So that's one answer. And then the second one, I got a chance to participate. And I don't know if other people saw this, but they were hosting a series of sessions looking at building guidelines for AI to be adopted at a federal level. And this is a follow-up where last year or in the years before, they'd come up with the Montreal Declaration, I hope I have the name right, where there were guidelines about AI, but it didn't get adopted and it didn't get traction. And so this is round two, and they were doing open houses and getting workshops across the country. And the thing that I challenged them with, and my feedback was, well, if we're not all digital citizens and have some literacy, how can we decide on AI guidelines if we don't know what AI is and we don't know the data? And so I think maybe there's some first things first here, where if we build up our digital intelligence, we can question the data we give up. We can make demands about how our data is used and the algorithms, and demand that there's transparency in how they're used. But if we lack that literacy, how do we make the demands? How do we get the right legislation? How do we get elected officials that ask the right questions? So it's there's work to be done. We've got to build our digital intelligence.
There's a comment saying play is such a key component to engagement and creativity. Thanks for calling that out. So the way you had stated that, and so agreeing with that, but maybe to go a bit further there. I mean, play is one commonly not associated term with technology, right? And then it's the whole area of arts and culture and that aspect of it as well. So there are those kind of hidden things that can be and are very important. So how do we pull some of that out so that it is more visible and we can have good discussions about that sort of thing?
My good friend Jasmine, who I work with, one of the founders of Beakerhead, there's a great example.
Yeah.
I talked about breaking down silos. Another silo would be between folks that view technology separate from the arts, and having the creativity, the thoughtfulness around design and engagement and drawing people in. What great services and experiences that may lead to. And so just furthering to break down barriers and silos that are just artificial, I think is going to be critical. And I use play, and a geek at heart, and I talked about coding. I started coding in grade 7 or 8, and still remember hooking up my first computer to its tape recorder to save stuff. And for me, playing with code has been fun. And I'd sure like other folks. And when we talk about a youth program, or as we talk about different curriculum or different experiences, there's such an opportunity for imagination, creation, and impact. I hope to share that passion with others and spark it. And we use Spark before, and we use Ignite. The Ignite is not just, I'm going to be a developer, I'm going to have great abstraction and look at my arrays. Hopefully it's fun. It should be. This is such creativity. So, as I look at the stuff you're doing with the various groups and the folks hosting, the people joining here, like it's our night. And here we are hanging out talking about digital intelligence and data for good and civic tech. There's a passion here. And to have some playfulness with it and some fun with it and creativity, we need to find ways to make that contagious and create a really big tent, draw people in, play with them, entertain, create together, try things. And, even part of it might be to recognize the abundance around us. And where I'm going with is it's okay to maybe make a mistake and try something and to run an experiment. It's not the end of the world. We'll try again. And maybe we've been a little too driven by scarcity unnecessarily, and it makes us afraid of a mistake. And when you're afraid, you don't have fun and you're not creative.
Great. Lots of positive comments, Lee, in the chat, and thanking you for your presentation. Very inspiring and enlightening. So I think we'll sort of cut it off here. Thank you very much, but maybe give you one final chance to have kind of a call to action, right? Or if you have a message for our groups related to the great things you're doing at SAIT and the School for Advanced Digital Technology. What's your call to action?
Oh, that's a good one. Thank you, Jeff. I was talking to some folks leading an enterprise, and they're talking about collaborating with us. And I turned to them and challenged them and said, I don't need you at the start line and the finish line. I need you there through the journey. And when you think about our ecosystem, I guess I challenge everybody to engage. And maybe it's as a coach or a mentor at a datathon or a hackathon. Maybe as we do a boot camp, be a guest speaker, coach or mentor, give back in, and also find opportunities to pull on those who you want to learn from. I think that's how we're going to succeed as together. So, be engaged if you aren't. If you are engaged, amplify it, tell some stories, and, we'll grow and succeed together. So if you're already doing it, great. And if you're not, come join us.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, Lee, so much. And we're looking forward to great engagement in the future from all our groups and for other citizens across Calgary. So have a great night. Take care. And thanks everybody for joining us at this point. Bye now.